deputies. Offering Deputy Jack Chambers, please.
Thanks, Ciarán Corla. And just to note before I begin, Deputy Mary Butler is going to take the final 2 minutes of Deputy O'Callaghan's time, and we mentioned that just before we began. So, like many others, I want to welcome members of the deaf community to the debate here this evening. I think what was outlined to us at the committee stage was a really honest and descriptive outline of the current situation that many members of the community face. I'd like to thank Dr. John Bosco, Miss Wendy Murray and Mr. Brian Crean, but also the interpreter Darren Byrne. And at the outset, I want to thank our chair of the Justice Committee, who is doing excellent work and has produced a report, and has been mentioned by my colleagues, has another report on the way. And I think we're seeing a very constructive Justice Committee by all members. I'd also like to thank you, Ciarán Corla, for making a change from your predecessor by allowing interpreters to be here, which has empowered members of the community to actually to see and be communicated with by members of the Oireachtas. And as has been mentioned by my colleague Deputy Wallace, hopefully we're joined by members of the deaf community in the not too distant future. And I'd encourage you all to join a party or none to run for local or general elections and participate in the political process, because that certainly would accelerate the work that is being done by this Justice Committee and by the Oireachtas generally around this matter. And hopefully we see members of your community as members of different local authorities, but also in the Oireachtas. I think it would be a very progressive and important step in our own political history if we saw that occur. As I've said, I'm very pleased to be able to speak on this important topic today, which I believe is an issue of basic dignity, human rights and equality. The debate offers an opportunity to reflect and consider how this country treats people in the deaf community. Unfortunately, a situation has been allowed to develop where some 5,000 deaf people in Ireland face a whole host of challenges and problems. Many deaf people in Ireland feel marginalised, and this was mentioned at the committee, and socially isolated because of the lack of recognition, understanding and compassion towards the issue. The deaf community have been very proactive in trying to advance both our understanding of the challenges facing deaf people and highlighting the need for legislative action. I commend the various interest groups who have championed the rights of deaf people, including groups like the Irish Deaf Society and the Deaf Village of Ireland. I was very impressed, but also deeply disturbed to hear some of the testimony of those involved in this area when they appeared before the Justice Committee. And one thing that stuck to me was even to the outline of people's issues and problems around seeing a general practitioner or any healthcare professional, and the depths people have to go to just get that basic interface and communication for something that's fundamental to anyone in anyone's lives. And as Deputy Daly mentioned, if this is strengthened on a legislative piece, we'll be able to focus each core part of public policy towards improving the lives and services of deaf people, but also sending a positive message that we take this matter very seriously and want to deliver for people in this community. For example, the literacy report of 1991, the neuro rehabilitation report found that 80% of deaf adults have a literacy equivalent of an 8 or 9-year-old. And this all means that trying to read books, letters, newspapers, the internet, all things to do without a second thought, becomes very difficult for deaf people. Similarly, watching television, going to the cinema, listening to the radio is more difficult when English is not your first language. And it's important that we put interpreting at the forefront on our television screens. That will build positive awareness for people that there is a different language there, and that it's not at a graveyard slot on our national televisions. I think that's regrettable, what we've seen by our national broadcaster. And as we mentioned, indeed, one member before the Justice Committee described the experience as extreme marginalisation. This is simply unacceptable, cannot continue, and requires swift action supported by all in this House. And I have to say, my colleague Senator Mark Daly introduced a bill on 2 occasions in the previous Oireachtas, which was rejected by the then Fianna Gael and Labour government. And it's unfortunate that a member of neither party has attended this debate at any stage for this debate this evening, and that's regrettable, but it also shows the lack, perhaps, of will on their part to take this matter seriously and to positively address the bill. And in terms of your own speech, Minister, I know you take matters around this very seriously, but I think, as my colleague Deputy O'Callaghan mentioned, a simple message around bringing this bill forward and having it progressed and legislated for is a much more positive message than listing conditions and constraints around the piece of legislation that's been tabled. All opposition pieces of legislation have some faults in terms of drafting and require amendments, but this is a motion about delivering a message to the deaf community that we take this matter very seriously and want to address their needs. And it shouldn't be an outline of constraints by the bill that Senator Daly has brought forward. I was going to conclude now and allow my colleague Deputy Butler to come in, but I was at the recent cabaret in the Irish Deaf village, and I have to say I was taken aback by the skill set. The Deaf Tone group were absolutely excellent, and to see members of our deaf community celebrate our history on a wonderful night in the Irish Deaf Village, and to see the work that's gone on there is truly inspirational. I hope here in the Oireachtas we can progress this matter positively and properly. I'd like to conclude by just saying this bill will result in the proper promotion, development and cultivation of the language for the very first time in the history of this state. This is an issue of human rights and equality, and I would call on all sides of this House to participate and be involved in future debates, and not to go home early on a Thursday, and to be here to see this very important debate. And it's important that we support this bill and this motion and support the deaf community by ensuring this bill is passed when it comes before the House.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chambers.